What does the annual meeting theme, the power of collaborative innovation, mean in your business? How will you use the annual meeting to collaborate with other stakeholders to address your top issue on the global agenda?
Well, collaborative innovation is a very relevant term these days. On the one hand, innovation has always been of utmost importance for societies at large, but also for business in specific. And now collaboration is an increasingly important term these days because the world has become more global. It has become, due to technology innovations, more complex, more interconnected, more real-time in a way. And that demands that innovation is not only happening inside an organization, but in the context of collaborations with lots of different stakeholders. And in that context, the World Economic Forum is a great opportunity. It's a marketplace where all these stakeholders meet and where collaborative innovation can actually get kick-started in a way, because everybody meets in Davos.
In which new ways are people and organisations collaborating, and how important is this for effective competition in your industry?
Well, I would say there has always been this kind of classic collaborative innovation or collaboration where businesses interact with customers, they interact with suppliers, they interact with other business associates. This has been the case decades ago and is still the case. What is changing these days, on the one hand, the form of collaboration is becoming much more intense. This has been enabled profoundly by new means of technology, especially by IT technologies, by interconnections, information flows, web-based technologies, and so forth. This has allowed businesses to unbundle their different business chain steps and connect these different steps with different stakeholders and collaborate. That is one thing. The other thing that has happened is obviously the world has truly become a global marketplace. Borders have come down, and collaboration is now not only happening in the vicinity of your own headquarters, but it's really going around the globe in all different corners of this very interesting world. There's new kind of networks. It's networks that have different means, technological means to work and to operate, much more intense than in the past. Then the partners inside the network are the classical partners, but then on top of that you have new partners. I should mention at this point also public stakeholders, NGOs, public interest groups that have also become kind of partners for business in a different way than was the case 10 or 20 years ago. So the world has profoundly changed.
Concerns about a lack of talent and the widening skills gap continue across many industries and regions. So how are you responding to these challenges within your organisation?
Yeah, the lack of specific talent, in our case, that is mainly engineers, qualified engineers, has truly become a challenge to us. And it's interesting when you look at the world at large that we clearly see a different situation when we talk about the Western economies and the newly emerging economies. It is very clear that in the newly emerging economies, the status of an engineer in engineering science as such is higher than is currently the case in the Western economies. And this has to do obviously with the development of the societies. And as a consequence of that, we see a real scarcity, a dearth of qualified engineers in Western economies, which makes us move into different places to source these qualified people. So we hire a lot of new engineers in places like China, in places like India, in places like Russia and the eastern countries in Europe. We try to do the same in Western Europe and in the US and North America and so forth, but it has become increasingly difficult. Fortunately, we are a global player and we can take advantage of a global resource world. And on top of that, we have an advantage because ABB is a global player. We are not only a global player with access to different countries and to different markets, but we also have a global culture. ABB has truly become a global corporation because it doesn't really matter what kind of passport you have, what original location you came from, what language you originally spoke, as long as you can identify with ABB. And with the great brand name we have in these various locations in the world, we can attract the people. That's our first job, attract the right people, and then to develop them, giving them the right opportunities to stay within the organization and contribute to our success.
What projects and initiatives are you engaged in with the World Economic Forum, and what drove your choice to partner with the Forum on those projects? In what ways can business contribute to tackling challenges on the global agenda?
The World Economic Forum actually gives us a lot of different opportunities to participate in collaborations, and I just would like to mention two which are of particular interest to us, to ABB. One is, of course, the Energy Industry Initiative, where the whole energy stakeholders, that means businesses from all different corners of the energy world, as well as other interest groups, get together and try to figure out what are the challenges we're facing up to in the next decades, or what kind of answers do we have for these challenges. So we're trying to put together a framework for global action. And there needs to be a framework for global action because the challenges are huge. The world in the next 20, 30 years needs tremendously more energy. One speaks about doubling of the total energy that is going to be consumed 20, 30 years down the road compared to today. And it needs this energy in a reliable way and also in an environmentally friendly way. We're speaking about global warming, scarcity of natural resources and all these things. So these are profound challenges. And I think from that point of view, it's absolutely paramount that places like the World Economic Forum help business to get together, form partnerships and address these issues. That's one example. Another example is the PASI initiative. PASI stands for Partnership Against Corruption Initiative. This again is a theme which is pervasive, unfortunately, in today's world still, which cannot be addressed by one single company. So it's only the amalgamation, the getting together of the various players and agreeing to certain standards which will enable us, the whole industry, to move forward and fight this scourge of corruption. So these are two examples where the World Economic Forum can help us, ABB, as well as our peers, to move in the right direction.
How do you see the world's economy evolving in the next 12 to 18 months, and how confident are you that the current market volatility will begin to stabilize soon?
Well, that's a very tricky question because everybody's wondering where the economy is heading for. It is clear that we are facing somewhat of a slowdown now because what started off as a purely financial crisis, so to speak, specifically related to the subprime mortgage market in the US, has become somewhat of a bigger challenge now because it has started to spill over into the real economy. So I think it's fair to assume that we will see a certain slowdown. The question is how much of a slowdown, particularly in the North American market, maybe in the European market, and to what extent will the emerging economies like China and India be able to overcome or offset that. I think the final ruling is still out. Our hopes are that we just see a certain slowdown that will stabilize, and then the world economy will continue to grow again at a slightly faster pace than what is expected for this year. So looking at that, I think I'm inherently positive because the fundamentals are such when you look at demographic changes, when you look at these new players like China and India, but not only those, others as well, that there's going to be an increase in demand, there's continued growth, and the world at large should benefit from that. There's other factors which make me more concerned. For instance, the rise of nationalism again, the rise of protectionism to some extent. We have seen certain countries really raise the specter of energy nationalism in different corners of this world. I don't think this is good for business, and this is not good for the world at large, because we are facing challenges that need to be addressed with a global approach. And if countries start to nationalize themselves again and to raise protective barriers, that's going the wrong direction. And we do see it, unfortunately, not only in one region of the world, but for different reasons in various regions of the world. And I think, again, the World Economic Forum here has a big task to make sure that this globalized world stays open and free, accessible to all stakeholders around the world.
We've talked about the rapid growth in India and China, but which other markets are you watching closely and why?
Well, China and India are the obvious cases because these are very large economies with huge numbers of populations, and they're all aspiring to move up and increase their standards of living. So I think it's a fair assumption to expect these two countries to continue to develop in big strides. But they're not the only ones, especially in our business. ABB's business is about electricity and automation. We're helping the world to raise productivity, to deal with energy in a reliable and efficient way, to make sure that we don't harm our environment too much and all these things. In this kind of business, we also see tremendous prospects in the Middle East, for instance, where we have incredible demand coming up because the Middle East is very cash rich, not only at the moment, but is going to stay like that for years and decades to come. They're investing a lot in downstream developments. We see similar patterns for different reasons in Russia and Eastern Europe economies, which are going to develop much faster than the mature economies in Western Europe. We have, I would say, justified hopes that Latin America will also continue to grow. In the mature economies, we have, in addition, we have other themes like, for instance, energy efficiency that will also lead to growth prospects for ABB. The mature economies are facing huge challenges as well. We need to deal with energy in a much more efficient way. We need to make sure that productivity stays up there. And these are underlying themes that won't disappear just a couple of years down the road. They're going here to stay for decades to come. And ABB is here to help our customers to deal with exactly these challenges. So in essence, we can be fairly optimistic. This growth in the world is not only dependent on China and India, but we actually see a lot of countries and regions that are moving in the same direction.
Do you think we're seeing a significant shift in the way the public and private sector can collaborate, and what are the implications for business?
I think we have already seen a certain shift in this collaboration between public sector and private sector. Whereas, let's say 20 years ago, it was mainly an interaction between business on the one hand and governments that set the standards and legislations on the other hand. It has become much more multilateral in a way. It's not just governments. It's the public at large, it's public interest group, it's NGOs that have become very relevant to business. And on top of that, it's not only these stakeholders around the headquarters of your company, but because we are active in a global world, these are multiplied by the number of countries and regions we're active in. So the world has become a very interconnected, very complex network of interactions in which a business needs to move. And therefore, the World Economic Forum is a great place to kind of figure out, probe, sound out a little bit where the directions are going of these different stakeholders.
As we're a leader in an industry where science has always played a role, what advice can you share with others who may now be more concerned by scientific considerations than in the past?
I think this is a very valid statement. I think science, scientific innovation, plays a major role in addressing some of the challenges we have ahead of us. I would say in the last 50 years, maybe in Europe and maybe North America, we have started to let loose a little bit the focus on science because it was societal improvements that captured the spirits of people in a different way than they did 100 years ago or 200 years ago in the Industrial Revolution. Now, people have started to realize that some of the challenges like natural resources becoming a scarcity, global warming, the fact that we need to deal with energy in an efficient way, they need to be addressed not only in a political way, but also in a scientific way. So I think science has played a major role, needs to continue to play a major role in public debate and in political decision making.
In what ways should science play a greater role in driving policy making, given its growing importance with respect to almost every major policy issue on the global agenda?
I think it has to start in a way with what kind of people, specific people, are involved in policy shaping. If you look at the world today, if you look at, for instance, the newly emerging economies such as China and India, you find a lot of engineers in government. If you do the same in North America and Europe, you find different kinds of people in government or in the legislative bodies. For very good reasons, obviously, because these societies went through different development patterns. But I think it's a challenge with business, especially with engineering business and technology businesses, to make sure that they are well represented also in governmental bodies and in public decision groups, for instance, in parliaments and similar bodies. If that doesn't happen, we run the risk that the voice of science doesn't get the right magnitude or importance that it deserves today and also for the next decades.
In what ways is your company using new communications channels such as blogging, social networking websites, etc., to reach an external or internal audience? And have they forced a rethink of your communication strategy?
Partnerships are happening today in all different ways and means. They're happening with external stakeholders and they're happening inside the company. And in order to enable these partnerships and to make sure that the information flows in all different directions, we have to use different information technologies. So at ABB, we're using today obviously all the conventional means that have been used 30, 40 years ago, and also the new methods, all the web and intranet and extranet enabled methods when it comes to specific vehicles like blogs, like wikis, like emails and so forth. I think the world has become a tremendously open and interconnected and real-time world. And if business wants to face up to the challenges of today's world, we have no other way than to use these particular means, and we're doing so.
Finally, given the demographic changes that we know are underway, such as increasing percentages of older populations in some regions versus a youth bulge in others, how is your corporation adapting to these shifts?
These are truly very relevant shifts. On the one hand, we've been speaking about the scarcity of qualified engineers that we're experiencing. That means that those people we have already in our system, we need to make sure that we continue to develop them, to retain them within ABB by giving them the right opportunities, and they have good job and development opportunities. It also means that we have to think in more flexible ways about how long we want to keep people in our system. And in that way, we have become very open at ABB in certain countries because there's country-specific laws and legislation that we have to take note of. But we've become very flexible in making sure we use people and we continue to develop them and give them an opportunity for a longer lifespan that was originally the case. That is one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is obviously to take advantage of these human resources, of the people that are aspiring to move on and move up the ladder in the newly emerging economies. Whether it's in China or India and other places doesn't really matter. And we are very happy that we have access to these people because we are very well established in these economies. On the one hand, we have great brand name. ABB is considered to be one of the top employers. We are a global corporation where it's not really relevant where you're coming from as long as you can adhere to the ABB values. You can feel at home very easily at ABB. So we do have the advantage that we're able to attract the right people, the young people in the emerging economies, that we give them opportunities so that they stay with ABB for many years. And so I think taking both sides of the coin together, even there are challenges, we feel competent and confident that we can deal with them.